concentrated in outer conditions that will permit my sons to take in impressions furthering the crystallization in themselves of the unique data required for a responsible existence worthy of free-brained beings. Your father and your uncle Corey soon became so attached to him that they never left his side, even when he was fulfilling his principal duties at the observatory, and even during these moments of electricity is constantly enlightened their reason and gave them practical explanations about observing various concentrations, the methods of studying their reciprocal influence, and the significance of these influences themselves. He explained to them how, and for what purpose, a definite cosmic concentration occupies a certain place, and informed them about the particularities of the influence that these concentrations have on one another during the constant cosmic turbo-oscillocratic process. In this way, under the guidance of this remarkable learned being, there were crystallized in the common presence of my results not only the data required for ever responsive of free-brained beings, but also many data for the recognition and direct perception of true information about cosmic concentrations and their functioning. By the way, it was just at this period that in each of my sons a subjective interest was gradually formed in what would become their favorite fields of observation and study. Your father, for example, liked to observe and study the reciprocal influence and maintenance of cosmic concentrations situated in the spheres nearest to the time source, the most holy sun absolute, while your uncle Corey manifested a special interest in observations of the planet Earth and the process of existence of the free-brained beings. It was partly due to me that this interest was aroused in me because, during my investigations of the psyche of your favorites, when I happened to be occupied with something else, I often entrusted him with keeping notes of all the changes which took place among them. When my sons were preparing to leave the planet Mars forever, your uncle Toyulan, as I was giving him my blessing, begged me to keep him periodically informed about my observations and study of the strange psyche of the biped beings of the planet Earth, which of course I promised to do and then they pull away toward the center closest to our common father. On their arrival it was soon evident that they knew a great deal about the position of cosmic concentrations, the properties and particularities, and were skilled in calculating the totality of their reciprocal influences within the whole, and so they were immediately assigned to the responsible duties I mentioned. From the time I learned of the permanent place of their existence as a host to which they had been found worthy, I sent to Toyulan every quarter of our year, as I had promised, an exact copy of all my notes on the observations I was making. Many years have passed since I began sending these epigrams to Toyulan, and I never knew what became of them until the day I was informed about those turbulent events on the planet Purgatory. It transpired that the High Governor of the Holy Planet Purgatory, whose all-quarters maintainer the Archchair of Heltamadios, happening to learn that one of the assistant directors of the epigram station, Toyulan, periodically received long epigrams from his father in the solar system Mars, expressed the wish to be made acquainted with their contents. It turned out that he not only became much interested in them himself, but even requested your uncle. similar to what is called on-earth radio, so that some of the highest being bodies dwelling on the holy planet might, if they wished, by way of relaxation, listen to this information about the psyche of those peculiar free-brained beings inhabiting one of the very remote corners of our megalocosmos. Your Uncle Toil and Riddicky is requested. Whenever you receive death aerograms from me who reproduce their contents on the common planetary fluid and in this way all those righteous souls dwelling on the holy planet informed of my observations and investigations of that strange psyche of the beings of the planet Earth. From then on, certain of the highest being bodies on the holy planet, who were following all my observations very attentively, began to ponder on this strange psyche. This pondering of the blessed highest being bodies led them to understand that something was wrong with the psyche of the free-brained beings of the planet Earth, and they even became suspicious about the origin of this something wrong, and ultimately many of them became seriously indignant at what first seemed to them to be an injustice from above. The more these indignant, righteous souls shared their impressions with others, the greater their number became, so that everywhere in the Gilawariaks, that is, towns, and villages of the holy planet, they had and deliberated among themselves only about this. The result of it all is that the inhabitants of the holy planet chose 50 righteous souls to undertake a joint investigation and to find out the true reason why such an absurdity existed in the psyche of the true brain sincerely, just you, who will be my direct substitute, that although all the righteous grows on the holy planet reach the conclusion by various most elaborate methods that the fundamental cause of all the abnormalities of the psyche of your favorites has always been, and still is, this maleficent idea, myself cannot confirm this categorically. It cannot be denied, however, that this fantastic idea played a large part in the progressive evolution of the psyche of these unfortunates. When I became interested in these events, and began to carry out my investigations to reconstruct the history of them, the rise of the formation of the individuality of this macroKorg-XL, many impressions were deposited in me and data were crystallized for a subjective opinion. This special research of mine clearly showed me that although he was indeed the first to use the terms good and evil, he was not to blame that these words later acquired such a maleficent sense in the process of existence of the favorites of all subsequent generations. Now, my goal, if I initiate you into the history of the arising and process of existence of macroKorg-XL, corresponding data will perhaps be crystallized in me for an approximate representation concerning this distressing terrestrial fact. From the time I decided to occupy myself with this history, whenever I met a qualified individual and inquired about anything that might throw light on one aspect or another of the individuality of this macroKorg-XL, who would probably be interested to learn that among the first individuals I met who could give me some information on this subject was an aged being of our tribe who turned out to be very helpful in our conversation, cleared up many things for me and indicated several excellent sources from which I later drew a great deal of useful information. This aged being I am speaking of was none other than the uncle of that young being of our tribe on whose account I had to descend to this planet of yours for the first time, and who afterward became the governor of all the beings of our tribe who were exiled to that system ward. This aged being existed on the continent of Atlantis at just the same period when macroKorg-XL also existed there. According to all the information I gathered in my various other special methods of investigation, this terrestrial free-brain being named macroKorg-XL arose on the continent of Atlantis as the result of the sacred process of El between two terrestrial beings of different sex who had just reached responsible age. Since this couple had a healthy heredity in every respect, and the external conditions of ordinary human existence on that continent were still relatively normal and happened to be specially favorable for this couple, the result of this sacred process, that is, this son, of theirs later called macroKorg-XL, received in his presence from his very arising and during his early childhood almost the same data required for a future responsible being of every scientific achievements he was soon even considered worthy to become a full member of the learned society of Afghans. During the process of his responsible existence, devoted entirely to science, he came one day to a clear vision of his own significance and sincerely realized his nullity. From then on, with sore grief, he meditated seriously on this realization, and the result of his meditations was that in every part of his entire presence the hope began to rise, and finally the conviction was definitely fixed in him, that conscious labor and intentional suffering would transform him from a nothing into a something. So he then began to labor consciously, without mercy toward his denying part, intentionally creating conditions to close it. Moreover, he carried out these conscious labors and created these intentional conditions particularly in relation to his manifestations and perceptions in the field of the duties he had assumed as a responsible being, that is to say, in his scientific investigations. It was just during that period of his existence that he understood certain cosmic truths. Well then, since in him, as in most of the free-brained beings of that period, data were still being crystallized for engendering the being impulse love of time, he decided, in order to share the truths he had discovered with other beings around him similar to himself, to engrave on marble a Will-Marcano, entitled, The Affirming and Denying Influences on Man. Will-Marcano, the continent of Atlantis was what terrestrial contemporary beings have replaced by what they call a book. Later, during my 6th descent there, I had the opportunity of seeing with my own eyes an exact copy of that Will-Marcano made out of the text of what are called Chirino, and of deciphering it in some detail. It will be very interesting and instructive to look or learn how this copy of the Will-Marcano that had been engraved by macroKorg-XL with his own hand, which I deciphered during my last sojourn on your planet, remained intact until the contemporary epoch, and so I will tell you about it briefly. When the original of that Will-Marcano was completed, and approved with sincere admiration by the other learned members of the Society of Afghans, it was placed in the center of the main cathedral of the beings belonging to that society. Since the contents of this Will-Marcano began to interest an ever-increasing number of the beings of that period, the leaders of the society decided to make several copies and put one in the center of each of their cathedrals, then existing in other cities on the continent of Atlantis, as well as on other continents. For this purpose, 7 very exact copies of it were made from the tusks of Chirino. One of these copies, as my psy-drone investigation showed, was then assigned to the cathedral of a small continent named Singraga, which lay not far from the continent of Graben Sea. During the second Transylvanian perturbation to that ill-fated planet, this small continent of Singraga, in the same way as Atlantis, entered within the planet with all that was on it. As for the continent of Graben Sea, or, as it is now called, Africa, it did not entirely disappear within the depths of the planet, but suffered the same fate as other still existing continents. For instance, Asia, that is, certain parts of it were engulfed, and in their place others rose from beneath the waters and monarchy of the Bulgarshano had only just been brought to the continent of Dragon Sea to be sent on to the cathedral for which it was intended, when that second great catastrophe befell this ill-fated planet, and because this copy was on a part of the surface of the continent of Dragon Sea that happened to be spared, it did not enter within the planet. After this terrible event, the work-a-good, pending saints, macroKorg-XL lay for a long time beneath the realms and was gradually covered with Ashiman. It was only about 30 centuries later, when your favorites had again multiplied and a process of reciprocal destruction had broken out between the communities held, Philnodenty, and, particularly, that the beings belonging